Nithya Balakrishnan in conversation with Mr. KTR. We are talking about nearly 2 months since what was probably Prime Minister Modi's biggest bouncer, the demonetisation drive. How do you think it has impacted the common man in India?
Well, obviously, what has been showcased so far is the common man's common man's inconveniences, and by and large, I think everybody empathizes with it. By and large, everybody understands that this has been a huge challenge. It has been a huge, inconvenience. But at the same time, I think the common man of this country understands, and the common man of this country also believes that there is definitely a gain beyond the pain.
What about in the long term when you do talk about black money and corruption, which are the two ultimate goals of the Prime Minister?
Well, I'll tell you two things though. I mean, my firm belief is that in a country where only 1% or less than 1% pay income tax, which I think is absolutely absurd, I think this will definitely improve upon our accountability, our transparency, our way of doing business. It will certainly improve the revenues of Government of India. It will also improve the way we do business as a state. And so therefore I think in the overall scheme of things, this definitely is something that is going to help the country. Now the second aspect of it though is regarding unaccounted for money or black money as people have been calling it. I have my own reservations, I have my own doubts, but at the same time I do believe that a lot more people would be brought under tax net, and therefore the revenues would improve, and therefore more access, more money and more capital to infuse into infrastructure, to infuse into the basics that India so badly requires.
But bluntly put, it was received with a huge round of applause in the initial days, but the euphoria kind of waned out when they realized that 95% of the population doesn't really, in a certain sense, have that kind of unaccounted for money or black money, and those were the people waiting out in line for ATMs, for and cashless economy. Is that really something that India should be targeting now? Is that the need of the hour?
India can only be a less cash economy. It can never be a cashless economy. I don't think any country in the world can be completely cashless. But at the end of the day, one thing is a fact, Nithya. It is the fact that India as a country has not achieved its full potential, and there are a couple of hindrances in the current systemic establishment that we have. For example, like I said, in a country where you have 130 crore people, only 1% of them paying any kind of income tax or being above 2.5 lakh of annual income is incredulous. I mean, it would make you think, twice as to where we are headed. And in a country where I think there are huge disparities as is, unless the Government of India and unless state governments put a concerted effort to actually correct it, I think we'll lead. I mean, we are watching so many civilian crises across the world, and we don't want to end up there. So I think this was much needed.
But if I were to argue with you that the taxpayer wants to see results on the ground, and probably what India is crying out for today is not digital transformation, so to say, as much as, urban infrastructure in place, rural infrastructure in place, and a lot more, sanitation and basic necessities like that, and not digital India for a large...
Well, I think it's a combination of all, because if you talk about digital transformation, I think the digital world that we live in today, in fact, will help you leapfrog from where you are, say, to about, it will give you that much needed 15 years of quick leap. So what the United States or some other first world country has achieved in about 20 years, I think India today, with the kind of technologies that are at its disposal, and with the kind of tech-savvy Indians that we have, the citizens that we have, I think we should be able to do it in less than 10 years. The point I'm trying to make is the digital revolution that we talk about will help us leapfrog. But at the same time, I don't think it's going to help you with the basics, like you said, infrastructure. Yes, we ought to get that right as well, but this is not a zero-sum game or a mutually exclusive kind of thing. You can continue to go on the digital transformation, at the same time also ramp up your urban and rural infrastructure. But the only way governments can do it is if they have access to capital. And the only way they can have access to capital is by way of increasing tax net, is by way of bringing in more transparency into the system, is by ensuring that every single tax rupee that comes in actually is spent again in improving our civic infrastructure.
Well, you are mentioning taxes here, and we are at the cusp of that game-changing tax reform, the goods and services tax actually being implemented. But a lot has changed in a certain sense in the state of the economy when you talk about when Telangana ratified it on 30th of August to today. Are we still on board when you talk about a rollout of GST on April 1, or should the impact of demonetisation be realised just a little while longer?
No, I think it's a fair start. I mean, you've had a series of reforms come in. I think it began with GST, and then there was the income disclosure scheme, and then came demonetisation. So it wasn't as if opportunities were not given. I think states have been given enough time to prepare, even for GST. And GST in a very heterogeneous country like ours, where the tax laws are very, very complicated, and on the one hand you're trying to attract investments, on one hand you're trying to improve your overall business-friendly atmosphere, and on the other hand you can't have these kind of barriers, you know, across different states, different barriers across different states. So homogeneity in terms of tax structure, I think, and also overall reform-oriented approach in the country across different states, I think is a great move. And I think we should be on course for GST as well.
Mr. KTR, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks so much for taking time off and joining us.
Thank you so much.